Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Voice of the People podcast here on kxnet.com. I'm Nicholas Kwolek. Today, we're talking about the upcoming June primary elections, plus the general election in November, and possibly some more topics. To join me to talk about all of that, first of all, is the chair of the NDGOP, Sandy Sanford, and the chair of the North Dakota Democratic Nonpartisan League, or commonly DEM-NPL, Adam Goldman. Both of you, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
Of
Thank
course,
you.
thanks for having us.
Certainly. So I'd like to first kind of go back and reflect a little bit about your conventions that happened not too long ago. Sandy, why don't you start first? How do you think everything went for the NDGOP convention?
Well, I'll tell you first and foremost, I inherited this convention when June of 2023, and it was a lot to bite off. But I think we put on a wonderful convention in Fargo at NDSU at the Shack. It was 2 full days. A lot of work was done. We had some incidences where there was a little bit of discussion and maybe some conflict. We started the convention with that, but it was 2 days of good work.
We've covered it on the news side as far as what happened with some of the votes, so specifically with Rick Becker. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah. I mean, we have to remember the delegation. We went into convention with a delegation of somewhere, 1,600 people. And that's a litmus test of where the Republican Party sits across the state of North Dakota. I certainly saw in 2024, compared to other years, and I've been to convention numerous times, we did see a 50-50 split in the delegation, where we did see a strong presence of what we would call grassroots conservatives. And that's what you're referring to when we discuss, in discussion in regards to Rick Becker. Becker was a delegate in his district of District 7. He was not seeking the endorsement. And there was a scenario where the two individuals, Julie Fedorchak, Alex Balaz, we did see what we saw, a spoiled ballot. That's a method that we saw used at convention. It's something. It was unfortunate that we did see it, but it was there. I thought Julie Fedorchak was wonderful when she, stood up and addressed the convention. She withdrew. Now what you do is, you take it to the primary. You take it to the June primary, and you let the state of North Dakota and Republicans choose their candidate. So that's where we're at.
Okay. Now, Adam, as far as the DEM-PL convention went, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think our party went in with a great sense of mission and a great sense of integrity and urgency about the state of the nation and the state of things here in North Dakota. And I think what you saw was that sense of urgency, and we got right behind our candidates. We couldn't be more delighted about Governor candidate Merrill Pepcorn. Senator Pepcorn was actually born just a few blocks away from where the Republicans were gathering, close to NDSU, and spent his whole life here in North Dakota. He often tells us that he's more recognized by his voice than by his face, because he's been on the radio and traveled around. Yeah. And I think the contrast that we were trying to create, we weren't trying to create, but the contrast between our convention of unity and really sort of working for the people. I think our mission is to get out there and say, we don't have we don't have the media presence, we don't have the statewide we don't have the statewide seats that drive financing and fundraising and media attention. But I think what people really came away seeing was that we were really sort of laser focused on the issues that matter to real working Dakaotans. Mm-hmm. Things like paid family leave, things like supporting school lunch waivers, so school kids can eat during the day. Right, those are policies that really help North Dakotans, and that we think that the DEM-NPL is championing. Things like personal freedom, the freedom to read the books you want, the freedom to get medical care between you and your doctor, not between you and politicians, and restoring that sense of ethics and integrity to government is really important. We've seen with the Republican supermajority, Nico Rios's comments towards police officers that we at the DEM-NPL say are unacceptable and he should resign. We see the financial shenanigans of Representative Jason Doctor. The people of North Dakota deserve better. And right now, the sitting president is the former president, is literally on trial in a New York courtroom. And the MPL just thinks that we deserve better. The people of North Dakota deserve better than that. So we were sort of really focused on candidates who could carry that message, and I think embody that message. And so we're very proud of what's come out of our convention.
We'll get to that in a second as far as the national level, but I want to go back to the whole endorsed candidate, because here you have now the endorsed candidates for both parties. How do you go about sort of trying to get as much focus on the endorsed candidates versus perhaps say a third party candidate or even a write-in, and not try to not exactly what happened the last couple of weekends ago, but in other words, focus on who the party is endorsing? How do you sort of keep everybody's focus on who you have endorsed for a possible winner? Sandy?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, at the Republican headquarters, we've already connected with all the candidates, all the endorsed candidates. We'll be meeting with them this Wednesday, and we have a strategic plan in order to help them from, again, from convention time through June 11th. So we'll be sitting down with those folks. But yes, in regards to even the Congress seat, Alex Velez came out and did receive the endorsement. So what that means is the delegation spoke at state convention, and we get behind him as a congressional candidate. We go 200%, 200 miles an hour behind him, and we right up to that June 11th, and we let and then we let the North Dakota Republicans decide. The results of June 11th, if he comes out and he's not that candidate, then there may be a little bit of a pivot through the generals, but that's what we're committed to, and that's what our rules commit us to.
Mm-hmm. And I was going to say, because the unique thing about, I think, perhaps this election on the Republican side is there are so many familiar faces to folks here in North Dakota, and now they're running for completely different positions.
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's a lot of people that have jumped out. You're absolutely correct. There's a lot of choices. And, again, we are a super majority in the state of North Dakota. We are a deep red state. However, there are numerous factions within, again, we call it a big tent. There are numerous factions out there. And, again, state convention, we saw a 50-50 split. We saw a large amount in the middle, and then a large amount to the far right. But it's just that was a small litmus test. So the June 11th primary, I mean, that's big for us. I mean, that's where we're putting everything between now and that date.
And Adam, Sandy mentioned big. She mentioned the big tent. As a challenge to the Dem NPL, of course, is trying to get out from underneath that tent, being the super majority, being the Republicans here in North Dakota. So how do you change, other than perhaps the candidates year to year, how do you change the strategy for trying to gain some more ground here in North Dakota?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is to just sort of push back politely and gently on North Dakota being a deep red state. And there's no such thing as a state that has a color. We get to decide that every single election. And so the people of North Dakota get to decide whether we're a deep red state or not. And I think the choice couldn't be more clear. We spoke about the congressional race. If North Dakotans actually live and believe in the values they claim to, Trygve Hammer served our country in uniform, worked in the oil fields, has worked as a rural school teacher. So I think who better to represent the people of North Dakota than someone who embodies the best of their values. And I think that in the congressional race, Trygve Hammer represents so much of who we are as North Dakotans. So we don't really think about, how can we, sort of get our candidate out there or things like that, right? Our candidate is out there, and I think we just encourage people to say, we think things about Republicans and we think things about Democrats, but perhaps we can look past the letter and actually look at what these candidates are talking about and who these candidates are and what they're hoping to accomplish. Again, I think Sandy probably agrees, like, party is important, of course, but the question is who is representing us as North Dakotans at the various levels of government. And the people get to make that choice. So our goal is to give Trygve and Katrina and Merrill the chance to get out there and get their message across. And once they do that, I'm sure Sandy disagrees with this, but I think that North Dakotans will really like what they see and perhaps be willing to pull the ballot for the Dem NPL in June.
Well, I'd like to jump in because I appreciate what you did say. I I really did when you said, you know what, we're going to, let the people decide in the ballot booth and in regards to, whether or not we're going to continue to be deep red. Because you're right in regards to, I mean, we're going to agree. I mean, that is where the choices, that's where their freedoms are at, is in the ballot booth. And we just want every North Dakotan to have the opportunity to vote in June, and then of course in the general. But you're right on another issue. I mean, I don't think you said it quite like this, but at the beginning and the end of the day, we are North Dakotans. We are North Dakotans, and we all have individuals that we love and care for. I have people in my family. I have sisters that are not in the same party as me. I love my sisters. I love my family. I love my friends. That's what we experience in the state of North Dakota because we're small, we're rural. And for people like me that are fourth and fifth generations, that's just the reality. So again, we want what's best for North Dakota. I think there's probably more things that I agree with my Democratic family than I disagree with. I mean, we come together as North Dakotans and we love each other. But again, we just need, our focus needs to get people to that June 11th primary and then get them through to the general election and let North Dakotans decide what is the best, how are we going to navigate, and what is the best for North Dakota.
I want to eventually, we were going to get to this point, but you transitioned so well because we're talking about, the local candidates, but I want to explore the topic with you both of starting from the top down. In other words, we have the presidential election as well too. Oh. So in your opinions, and both of you can obviously weigh in on this, how much of who is running at the top, namely the presidential offices, how much does that trickle down to the influence they have over North Dakota elections, would you say?
Yeah, well, I think, of course,
you go ahead, Adam.
I think it is a huge amount, of course. And I think, the main thing, we were just speaking about the importance of voting and the importance of the ballot boxes, that President Biden has described this as a fight for the soul of the nation. Former President Trump still refuses to acknowledge that the 2020 election was a free and fair election and that he lost. He's under numerous indictments for alleged crimes related to his attempts to deny the reality of the election and to overturn the election. So I think that's an extremely important point. I think at the top of the ballot, that question of what does it mean to live in a democracy, whose ballots count, and how do we ensure free and fair elections? And frankly, how do we acknowledge that that the winners of elections are the actual winners? In our constitutional republic, we've never once had a president refuse to concede power. And that's a great celebration of us as Americans and the deep legacy of our American history. In 2020, we saw former President Trump refuse to concede that he lost a free and fair election. And I think that there's no real getting around that question of democracy this time around.
And I would say, you know what, I think I'm rather tired of looking back, and that's even with my own party. I mean, people came out of 2020 and they came out of COVID stirred and emotional, and I'm just looking ahead. I'm dealing with today and I'm looking ahead. But I do think that the 2020 election and in the last 4 years, it's what's brought this kind of this emotional turmoil, not just in the state of North Dakota, but throughout the country and our nation. And I agree with Adam that whoever's our president, there is a trickle down effect. I mean, we have felt it every day under Biden in the state of North Dakota. I mean, we have experienced the overreach. We've experienced, the cost of our groceries. We've experienced, we're watching what's happening, on the southern border, but I also think we need to look at the northern border. And I want to be very clear. I mean, when, from what I understand in the Republican Party, I mean, they're not about just shutting the door, but they want to see legal immigration and immigration reform. To say that, again, we have to recognize we all came from other countries, right? I mean, we are a melting pot, and we are a beautiful country, and we're a melting pot of culture from different countries, and we have not been in America that long. So let's just be very frank about that. But we do want to be responsible. And, again, if somebody were to come into my home. They come into my house. There's a little bit of boundary there, and there's some rules. I have some house rules. So I think it's appropriate to have legal immigration and to do it appropriately. I have worked in some of the human trafficking issues in the state of North Dakota, and I am incredibly concerned about illegal immigrants coming into the state of, not just to our state, into our country, because if they are not documented appropriately, they're almost like ghosts. They're easy to move, and they're easy to buy and sell. And so, I mean, I can look at human trafficking and understand that is a real reason why we need immigration reform, and we need to clean it up. And it starts at our border, but it's not just the southern border; it's the northern border as well. But under Biden, I don't know that there's one Republican that's going to say, Adam, we really want to hold tight to him. I mean, we're going to go, again, 200 miles an hour behind the Republican candidate. The state of North Dakota, March 4th, everybody saw that we had a presidential caucus. We had about 2,000 individuals that came out for that, and it was a clear indication that they're getting behind President Trump, 84%. So what that tells us in the state of North Dakota is Republicans will go now to Milwaukee, to the national, and it was winner take all. We are going all behind Trump. So that's where we're at.
Adam,
So which part of the bipartisan border negotiation that was through that Republicans were prepared to vote for, and that President Biden had said he was prepared to sign, and then when Trump came out and said, no, we shouldn't do this, we talk so much about the southern border and so-called illegal immigration and all these issues, but there was a grand bipartisan deal largely negotiated by Speaker Mike Johnson that Republicans were prepared to pass. So again, I mean, I guess I would just wonder which of those proposals are you opposed to, or do you think the Republicans were right to vote down?
Well, I think in general, we know. I mean, you're not new to politics. We know that there's political narratives, and there's political emotional speaking points that people get behind to drive narratives and really to drive campaigns.
Right, like the narrative that illegal immigrants are flooding across our southern border. That's an emotional claim that you're making. But again, like we're talking about what are the policies that actually help North Dakotans, that actually help Americans. And there was a bipartisan border bill. And it was only, 2-3 months ago that the bill supported by Biden, supported by congressional Democrats, was voted down by Republicans. So again, are we a nation in search of solutions? Or are we holding on to problems so that we can try and indict the other party and hold the other party responsible and damage the other party's presidential prospects while actual real Americans are suffering?
Yeah. Well, I spoke about the divide, not just in the state of North Dakota, across our nation. We're seeing it on a national level. I'm seeing it in the RNC. It is time for people with real solutions to come to the table. And it's time for people that don't necessarily agree in all things to come to the table and talk these things out. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I ran for the NDGOP chair, is because I saw that there was maybe methods to not allow discussions, unfortunately, maybe discussions that are uncomfortable to happen. And I'm okay with having uncomfortable discussions. And I think everybody should, not just within the Republican Party, but also between, with the Republican and Democrat friends. But yeah, you're right. We are seeing some real issues on a national level. And again, in the state of North Dakota, I mean, I just want us to stick with that core value of Republican. I want to, again, we want to make sure that Kelly Armstrong is our governor. We want to keep Congressman or Senator Kevin Cramer in DC and keep our statewides, in office. They're doing great work. And, they stand for the strong Republican platform in the state of North Dakota. And we believe in local control, so we're going to do as much as we can at home.
Except you don't actually believe in local control, because you want the federal government to be able to tell women what kind of health care they can and can't get. You want the federal government to be able to tell us what kind of marriages we can and can't get. The letter of support that you gave to the state's intendant of school instruction wants to ban Muslims from teaching because of their religion, wants to pray in school. These are not issues of local control. That's the issue of the federal government or the state government imposing their decisions upon local communities. And again,
Yeah.
you spoke about all of us coming together to discuss the important issues, and Democrats in that bipartisan immigration bill were prepared to sign into law things that were, a very difficult, bitter pill for many Democrats to swallow. But the importance was not getting Kevin Cramer back into office, because it doesn't matter whether it's an R or a D or a Cramer or Christensen. What matters is, are these people prepared to pass policies that will help improve the lives of Americans? And I think that's what the contrast that the Dem NPL is trying to make with the Republican Party. There are policies that the Dem NPL supports, things like paid family leave, things like supporting, making sure school kids have enough to eat, things like making sure that doctors and patients are in control of their own healthcare. Those are policies, and I think there's this idea that you know, uh, politics is about performance, or politics, what happens doesn't actually affect us. But the decisions that these policymakers have control over, they have profound effects. I mean, Sandy spoke movingly about immigration. There are 13 million undocumented people, and they have lives that they are hoping to fulfill in this wonderful country. And the government had a chance, a bipartisan chance, to improve their lives and to improve the lives of border communities. And the Republicans voted it down to keep a weapon against President Biden in an election year.
Well, getting back to local politics, again, the state convention, again, it's a litmus test of where the party's at. The June election, of course, our general is a much larger body statewide. And I did discuss the fact that in our Republican Party, we have numerous factions and numerous, well, I would call them numerous factions. And so whether or not, we have core values that we can agree on. But yes, there's conservative, there's a far right caucus, there's a grassroots caucus, there's middle, there's left. We're just going to stick with our core values, and we're going to bring those to the ballot booth.
And I want to just
What are the core values?
If I want to pick up on that really quick, Adam, for as far as staying local for just a
Sure.
second. I'm not sure what discussions, if at all, you've had with Secretary of State Michael Howe. We've had him on the podcast before talking about elections. From what you've seen or what you've heard, or for yourself, do you both believe that North Dakota's election ballots are safe and secure this time around? And not to say that they weren't, but of course that was the huge one of the big election topics from the last presidential election was ballot security and so on, and it's been kind of this ongoing discussion. So do you believe that North Dakotans have 100% chance of having their votes kept safe?
Yes, I mean, again, we go back to 2020. It's time to move on and look ahead, and just whether there was, I don't necessarily think that there was anything in 2020 in the state of North Dakota. Truly, I just don't know if that was ever reflected. I have faith in the Secretary of State office and in Michael Howe and his team. I know in the Republican Party, it came down through the RNC. They did put together in 2021 a voter integrity committee, and we are going to implement that in the state, in the Republican Party as well. And it's just for people that have questions and are concerned. Make sure that you know the processes. Make sure that you're well aware of the processes. Because we don't want to be taking things from outside of the state and theories of this or that. I mean, we want to keep our nose in the state of North Dakota. What happened in Arizona, I get it. Let's be concerned. It's a swing state. It can affect our country and the presidential office. But you know what? Let's just do good work in the state of North Dakota. And I do believe he's doing a wonderful job as Secretary of State.
Yeah, I agree. But again, they're all swing states. We all get to make that decision every 2 years. So the idea that we should be concerned about election integrity in Arizona, which cost millions of dollars and produced nothing because it's a so-called swing state. Every vote matters for every American everywhere across this land, all up and down the ballot, partisan, nonpartisan. And again, I've served on various ballot signature commissions. The ballot is secure. The Republicans, again, they say this now, but they are trying to move to make paper balloting across the entire state for everything, because they don't trust the balloting process. So again, we're hearing one thing about what these core Republican values are, which I guess we still don't know. And then we hear another thing when it comes to actual processes. So why should the people of Arizona get to be concerned just because they're a swing state, but we don't. I mean, all ballots are sacred.
Well, we've got about it's been amazing that a half hour is almost passed us by, but I want to wrap up with about the last 4 minutes remaining. Um, Adam, a final point or two about looking ahead to June and into November.
Yeah, I think the message of the Dem NPL is clear, that we're the party that stands for workers, for farmers and ranchers, for ordinary North Dakotans just trying to make their lives better. I point out that tomorrow at NDSU, the Republican legislators are gathering with Harold Hamm behind closed doors to discuss where to put pipelines through North Dakota. That's something that our House Minority Leader, Zach Issa, said should be open to the public. You should not have out-of-state oil billionaires meeting behind closed doors, Republican legislators, to talk about the issues that affect the natural resources here in North Dakota. And that's just, again, one example of the way that the Republican Party says one thing about local control, but actually is prepared to sell us out for oil and national interests. And that's just one example here locally. So look, if you look at the bill that the Dem NPL put forward, family leave, paid family leave, free school lunches for children. You should be able to read what you want. You should be able to write what you want. Librarians shouldn't be punished. Doctors shouldn't be punished. So the Dem NPL is prepared to go forward, in the old-fashioned way of our nonpartisan league ancestors, neighbor talking to neighbor about the real issues that matter to real people, and provide real solutions for them. I think that the Democratic Party nationally and the Dem NPL here locally lives those values. And I encourage everyone to vote.
Andy?
Well, so I agree with Adam on some of that. Again, the Republican Party, we are the party for North Dakota, for rural values, for agriculture, for oil, for industry, for small business, for family values. We're the party of the family. We are pro-life. And we have core values. We have, we believe in we do believe in border security. We believe in low taxation, local control, health freedom. And I do think that, again, I know we have strong candidates going into the June primary and onto the general. And I do believe that we talked a little bit, I know we're a supermajority today, and we want everyone to get out and vote. And you're right, Adam, every vote does count. And I'm pretty sure we're going to come out a supermajority again. I mean, this is what North Dakota is, strong Republican family values. And that's where North Dakota, that's where we sit. So thank you.
Well, I can't thank you both enough for being here. It's obviously extremely important for everybody to get, as many different takes and perspectives, and especially from the two major political parties, not only here in North Dakota, but the country as well. So Sandy Sanford and Adam Goldwyn, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Voice of the People podcast. And thank you for joining us. Keep it tuned here to kxnet.com. We'll be back soon with more on the questions and answers affecting you, because remember, it's your voice that matters, the voice of the people.